My name is Charlotte Reeves, and today is one of those surreal days when the past decides to knock on your door, uninvited. I was sitting in my glass-walled office on the 34th floor, staring out at Manhattan's skyline. The late afternoon light caught the gold trim of the Chrysler Building, and for a second, I allowed myself to breathe it in. The view, the silence, the subtle weight of everything I had built. My silk blouse clung softly to my skin, the faint smell of jasmine from my perfume lingering in the air. The desk in front of me was clean, perfectly organized, like the life I had forced into order. Then my phone buzzed. A message. A name I hadn't seen in years. I froze. My manicured fingers hovered above the screen, suddenly trembling in a way I hated to admit. It was a group chat from college, the very people who once laughed at me, who called my idea childish, impractical, even embarrassing. And now, they wanted to meet. Charlotte, we're in town. Can we stop by? I laughed under my breath, though it wasn't humor I felt. It was irony. A heavy, bitter irony. Because what they mocked back then, that very idea, is the reason I'm sitting in this office, worth more money than I ever imagined. And they don't know. Not yet. I reached for my phone, exhaled slowly, and typed back 2 words. Come over. I wasn't always this woman, polished, composed, and unshakable. Back then, I was just a 21-year-old girl with a spiral notebook full of messy sketches and half-baked ideas. My dorm room at Boston University was cramped. The radiator hissed like it had a personal vendetta against me, and the scent of burnt coffee clung to everything. I can still hear the laughter. Not the fun kind. The cruel kind. It was a Friday night, and instead of going out, I had pitched my big idea to a group of classmates, people I considered friends. I stood at the front of the common room, my hands shaking as I held up that notebook. My voice cracked as I tried to explain how ordinary people could connect, share resources, and collaborate on projects without needing to be in the same place. Charlotte, one guy smirked. That's cute. Like a kindergarten sharing circle. Another chimed in. It'll never work. Nobody cares about your little fantasy app. And just like that, the lump in my throat swelled until I could barely breathe. Their laughter echoed long after I left the room, clutching my notebook to my chest as if it could protect me. That night, I almost threw it away. Almost. But then I thought of my grandmother. She wasn't a businesswoman or a professor, but she had this way of making me believe I was capable of more. Before she passed, she gave me a silver locket with the words etched inside. Trust what they can't see yet. I remember holding that locket in my palm, tears running down my cheeks, whispering to myself, they don't see it, but I do. The next morning, I made a decision. No more begging for validation. No more waiting for someone else to give me permission. I walked into the financial aid office and asked about part-time jobs. I signed up for late-night shifts at a campus cafe. I sold old clothes online, scribbled business plans in the margins of my textbooks, and taught myself the basics of coding from free forums. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. That was the first night I stopped being the girl who needed approval and started becoming the woman who would prove them wrong. The years that followed felt like living in 2 different worlds. In one world, I was the broke college student working night shifts at a cafe, my clothes permanently smelling of espresso and burnt bagels. I'd stumble back to my dorm at 3 a.m., eyelids heavy, fingers stained with ink from jotting down notes between customers. The exhaustion was bone deep. Sometimes I would cry into my pillow, silently, so my roommate wouldn't hear. But in the other world, the one I created in secret, I was building. Slowly. Quietly. I started small. Using an old laptop with a cracked screen, I built the first prototype of my sharing platform. It was clunky, ugly even, but it worked. I posted it anonymously online, and to my shock, a handful of strangers actually signed up. People wanted to connect, to trade ideas, to collaborate. That tiny spark kept me alive. Then came Margaret Langston. She was a professor in the business school, sharp as a blade, but kind in a way that didn't make you feel small. She caught me one day in the library, passed out on top of my laptop. Instead of lecturing me, She asked what I was working on. For the first time, I showed someone my prototype without shaking in fear. She studied it, then looked me straight in the eye. Charlotte, this isn't a silly idea. This is potential. But you'll need grit, discipline, and allies who believe in you. Are you ready for that? I swallowed hard and nodded. From that day, Margaret became my mentor. She pushed me harder than anyone ever had. She introduced me to alumni in tech, helped me polish my pitch, and taught me to own my voice instead of apologizing for it. The struggle didn't vanish, it intensified. Nights blurred into mornings. I coded until my fingers cramped. I faced rejection after rejection from investors who dismissed me with polite smiles. One even said, "You're too young, too female, and too naive to pull this off." Each dismissal stung, but it also fueled me. And then my first breakthrough, a small nonprofit organization agreed to use my platform to coordinate volunteers. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. I still remember refreshing the dashboard, watching names pop up, watching people connect through something I had built. After that came the first paying client. Not much, just enough to cover groceries for the month. But to me, it was a fortune. It was proof. I didn't tell my old friends. I didn't post flashy updates online. My social media showed me sipping coffee in cheap cafes, still hustling, still figuring things out. They thought I had disappeared into mediocrity. But behind the curtain, I was rising. Quietly, deliberately. Every late night, every bitter rejection, every whisper of self-doubt, they became bricks in the foundation of something far bigger than any of them could imagine. And I promised myself, when the time came, I wouldn't chase them for validation. They would come to me. I heard the elevator doors slide open before I saw them. The soft ding echoed through my office lobby, followed by familiar voices, laughter that used to sting me like broken glass. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittering beneath me, as they stepped inside. "Wow," one of them whispered. They weren't expecting this. I could tell by the way their eyes darted across the room. First to the framed abstract paintings on the walls, then to the marble coffee table, then to the rows of awards lining the shelves. My office wasn't ostentatious, but it carried the weight of someone who had made it. And I had. "Charlotte," a voice cracked. It was Ethan Cole, the loudest of them all back in college, the one who had once told me my idea belonged in a kindergarten classroom. He looked around like he had stepped into another universe. "This is yours." I turned slowly, smoothing the cuff of my blouse, my heels clicking against the hardwood as I walked toward them. "Yes. All mine." Their expressions were a mix of disbelief and something else. Envy, maybe even shame. "Wait," another classmate, Melissa Turner, stammered. "So, what exactly do you do?" For a moment, I let the silence stretch. I wanted them to feel the weight of it, the irony of them asking me to explain the very thing they once mocked. Finally, I smiled. "Do you remember that silly little app you laughed at? The one you said would never work?" Their eyes widened. "Well," I continued, walking to my desk and tapping the screen of the large monitor. "It's no longer an app. It's a platform used in over 40 countries by nonprofits, startups, and Fortune 500 companies. We help millions of people connect, collaborate, and build projects every single day." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Millions. Millions of users," I corrected, "and millions of dollars." The room went quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of the city outside. I leaned against the edge of my desk, crossing my arms. "I'm the founder and CEO of ShareSpace. Valuation this year crossed $300 million. Melissa blinked hard, as if trying to process the number. "Charlotte, we had no idea." "Of course you didn't," I said softly, though my tone carried an edge. "You never cared to look. You were too busy laughing." I watched their faces shift. First disbelief, then regret. Ethan shoved his hands into his pockets, suddenly fascinated by the floor. Melissa tugged nervously at her sleeve. One by one, the bravado drained from them. The same people who once made me feel small were now shrinking in my presence. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The room itself told the story. The sleek furniture, The quiet efficiency of my assistant outside, the screens filled with metrics climbing higher every day. I invited you here, I said finally, because you asked, not because I needed you. And now you see the truth. Silence. None of them could meet my eyes. I walked back toward the window, letting the city lights wash over me. For years, I had carried their laughter like a scar. But standing there now, I realized something. This wasn't about revenge. It was about revelation. They mocked my idea, I whispered, almost to myself. Then I turned back to them, my voice firm, steady. And now it's worth millions. Their faces told me everything. The shame of having doubted me, the shock of realizing what I had become, and the quiet, unspoken question lingering in the air. What now? The silence hung thick, almost suffocating. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. Charlotte, look, we were kids. We didn't know what we were saying back then. We didn't mean. I held up a hand, stopping him. You meant every word.
And it hurt.
Don't rewrite history just because the ending didn't go the way you expected. Melissa shifted uncomfortably in her chair. You're right. We were cruel. But maybe now, maybe we can make it right? Maybe we can be part of this. Her words should have made me laugh, but I didn't. Instead, I studied them carefully. Their nervous smiles, their desperate hope that my success could rub off on them somehow. For once, they needed me, and that gave me choices. You want to be part of this? I said slowly, crossing one leg over the other. Then here are my conditions. They straightened, suddenly alert. Ethan, I began, looking directly at him. Back in school, you loved tearing down other people's ideas. You thought it made you clever. My condition for you is simple. Build something. Anything. Stop mocking, start creating. Until then, you have nothing to offer me. His face flushed, but he nodded stiffly. Melissa, I turned to her. You were always chasing approval, desperate to be in the right crowd. My condition for you is to stand for something real. Volunteer. Mentor someone younger. Learn that worth isn't measured by who notices you, but by who you lift up. She swallowed hard, blinking back emotion. I shifted my gaze to the others, each of whom had played their part in my humiliation. For every single one of you, my condition is the same: change. Not for me, for yourselves. Because I won't surround myself with people who haven't learned from their mistakes. They exchanged uneasy glances. Charlotte, Ethan tried again, his tone softer now. Are you saying you'll help us? If we do this? I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm but unyielding. I don't owe you help, but I don't believe in shutting doors forever. If you grow, if you truly become better people, then maybe, our paths can cross again. Until then, I have no place for you here. The words hung in the air like a verdict. I could see the conflict in their eyes, pride battling shame, fear battling the faint spark of possibility. For the first time, they weren't laughing at me. They were listening. Really listening. I softened just slightly, my voice carrying both steel and compassion. I don't need apologies. I need proof. Actions.
Change.
That's the only currency that matters to me now. Melissa whispered, We'll try. I nodded once, then stood, signaling that the meeting was over.
Good.
Because I won't let the past define me, but I also won't let it repeat itself. They rose to leave, subdued, humbled, their steps quieter than when they had arrived. For once, the power was mine, and not because I demanded it, but because I had earned it. When the elevator doors closed behind them, the room fell quiet again. I stood still for a moment, listening to the faint hum of the city below, the steady rhythm of my own breathing. The confrontation hadn't left me rattled. It had left me lighter, as though I had finally set down a burden I'd carried for years. I walked back to my desk and pulled open the small drawer on the right. Nestled inside, worn smooth by time, was the silver locket my grandmother had given me. I ran my thumb over the words etched inside. Trust what they can't see yet. I smiled. She had believed in me before anyone else did, before I even fully believed in myself. And in that moment, I realized, The real victory wasn't the millions in the bank, or the offices in 3 countries, or the valuation that made headlines. The real victory was this feeling, standing strong in the very place where they once tried to make me small, and knowing I had never needed their approval. A week later, I got a message from Melissa. A photo of her volunteering at a community center, hair pulled back, no filters, no crowd to impress. Starting somewhere, her text read. Then another, from Ethan. A link to a prototype he had coded himself. It's rough, but it's mine. I didn't reply right away. But when I did, it was simple. Good. Keep going. Because change wasn't mine to hand them, it was theirs to claim. As for me, I finally understood that my journey wasn't about revenge. It was about becoming, about taking pain and turning it into power, about trusting the unseen, the unheard, the ridiculed, until it became undeniable. I fastened the locket around my neck, feeling its familiar weight settle against my skin. Outside, the skyline glowed like 1,000 quiet promises. And as I gazed out over the city that once seemed too big for me, I whispered the truth I had carried all along. Truth meant for every girl who was ever laughed at, doubted, or dismissed. They mocked my idea, and now it's worth millions.